Say the sermon is an art form for you?
Yes, and I think for a number of people in our culture, the sermon somewhere along the way got hijacked by a bunch of other impulses. And for many people, the sermon raises the provocative question, when's lunch? And so I think sometimes the sermon is actually hijacked by another thing the church is trying to do. So you heard a wonderful 32-minute sermon, and then at the end was a 7-minute thing on how we need to raise money for the new addition. And when all of a sudden the sermon became about everybody pitching in money to build a bigger building, you all of a sudden did what to the previous 32 minutes? What was that?
Yeah.
Like, was that and all of a sudden you have the sense that there's something else that the sermon was. We got through the sermon to get to something else. Or I think sometimes sermons is, if we're truly honest, propaganda. This is about telling people what they already know so they will all feel good about themselves. It actually is inoculated against any sort of new insight or truth because it has to give the party line, period. That's its point.
The sermon as propaganda.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So I think through the minor prophets. They're laying on their side, they're cooking stuff over human waste, they're tying big boards to their back, they're marrying prostitutes. There's a sermon. Its roots are actually more performance art. They're doing something and it's loaded with significance. And you get it right away. Last night with the pastors, I was talking about how when Jesus is coming over the Mount of Olives and he curses the fig tree, well, he's headed into the temple area. And a fig tree in first century Jewish culture was a symbol of like spiritual leadership. So he's headed into the center of the spiritual leadership structure and he curses a fig tree. That's like burning the flag. I mean, that is, he is saying this whole system, this religious, military, economic complex is going down. It is corrupt, and it is under God's judgment. And he does this by cursing the fig. His disciples knew exactly what he's doing.
Sure.
So he didn't then say, now, there are 3 points I want you to understand. It's a moment,
yeah.
And everybody got exactly what it was. So the sermon has its roots in, it is like an art form that opens you up, it challenges you, it provokes you, it educates you, it teaches you, it heals. And that needs to be reclaimed.
So when you're writing a sermon, are you thinking, do you have this other voice in your head that's saying, that's propaganda? Or you know, how are you keeping yourself from doing the very thing that you kind of resist?
Well, like if you're starting with a biblical text,
yeah.
I always begin with the assumption that there is something brilliant, beautiful, subversive gospel in this text. There is something here. So when I approach it, I assume I'm going to learn something, something's going to sort of erupt. And